The Galactic Dominion, the Keth Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Their massive fleets of black warships moved like death itself through the star systems, crushing any world that dared resist their iron rule. The Keth were born warriors, standing 8 feet tall with thick armor like skin and 4 powerful arms that could tear steel apart. Captain Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dark Fang, watching another human colony burn on the planet below. These strange bipedal creatures had appeared in the galaxy only 50 years ago, spreading across dozens of worlds with surprising speed. But like all the other races before them, they would learn to bow before Keth might. Commander Tor, report on the human resistance. Vex growled through his breathing apparatus. Minimal, Captain. Their ships are small and weak. Their weapons barely scratch our hull plating. This world will fall within the hour. Commander Tor's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched the human defenders scatter. The humans had tried to fight back when the Keth first arrived in their space. Their ships were fast but fragile, built more for exploration than war. Their weapons were primitive energy beams that could barely damage Keth armor. Most laughable of all, they seemed to value the lives of individual soldiers, retreating when their casualties grew too high. These humans are like the Vel before them, Vex said, remembering how they had crushed that bird-like race 2 centuries ago. They build cities instead of fortresses. They make art instead of weapons. They will make good slaves once we break their spirit. On the planet's surface, the human settlement of New Haven was in chaos. Families ran through burning streets as Keth dropships landed like metal thunderbolts. The local defense force had already fallen back to the evacuation points, following their strange human custom of protecting civilians over military positions that Mayor Tom Bell watched from the command bunker as the last transport ships lifted off, carrying thousands of refugees to safety. His own ship waited on the landing pad, but he would be among the last to leave. That was the human way. Leaders serve their people, not the other way around. Sir, we need to go now, urged Captain Ross, the Defense Force commander. The Keth will be here in minutes. Tom nodded, taking one last look at the city his people had built over 20 years. Gardens and schools, hospitals and theaters, all would be ash by morning. But the people would live. They would find new worlds, build new homes, and remember. What was lost as their ship lifted off? Tom saw the Keth warriors marching through the streets below. They moved in perfect formation, their black armor gleaming, their energy weapons ready. They had conquered 100 worlds this way, and they would conquer 100 more, but Tom had seen something in the refugee reports that gave him hope. The humans were different from the other races the Keth had faced. Where others had surrendered or died fighting alone, the humans were doing something new. They were learning. They were adapting. And most importantly, they were angry. Word had already spread through human space about New Haven and the dozen other colonies that had fallen. The Keth expected fear and submission. Instead, they were getting something they had never encountered before in their 3,000 years of conquest. A species that grew stronger and more determined with each defeat in the depths of human space. Far from Keth sensors. Massive. Shipyards worked around the clock. The humans had studied every battle, analyzed every Keth weapon, examined every piece of wreckage. They were building something new, something the galaxy had never seen. The Keth had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. Their ships were massive, their armor thick, their weapons devastating. They had never needed to innovate because nothing in the galaxy could challenge them. They had grown comfortable in their dominance, certain that their way of war was the only way, but humans had a different philosophy. Where the Keth saw war as domination, humans saw it as problem-solving. Where the Keth relied on tradition and proven methods, humans embraced change and innovation. Where the Keth fought for conquest, humans fought for survival. And there was nothing more dangerous than a species fighting for its very existence. As the Dark Fang moved on to its next target, Captain Vex allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had fled like all the others. Their resistance was crumbling. Soon, the Keth Empire would add another species to its long list of subjects. He had no way of knowing that in a secret shipyard orbiting a hidden moon, the first human battleship was nearing completion, and when it finally emerged from the shadows, it would carry with it the fury of an entire species that refused to kneel. The human response asterisk deep in the Centauri system, hidden behind the gas giant Kronos, the largest military construction project in human history, was reaching completion. Admiral Kate Morgan stood in the observation deck of Shipyard Omega, watching as the final armor plates were welded onto the hull of humanity's answer to Keth domination. The Defiance was unlike any ship ever built. Where Keth vessels relied on massive size and heavy armor, human engineers had created something entirely different. The ship was sleek and angular, its hull made from a revolutionary composite that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. Instead of the traditional human approach of speed over power, the Defiance had been designed as a weapon of war. Status report, Commander Blake, Admiral Morgan said to her chief engineer. All systems are green, Admiral. The new fusion reactors are operating at peak efficiency. The magnetic rail guns are calibrated and ready. And the surprise we've been working on is installed and tested. Commander Blake smiled grimly. The humans had learned much from studying Keth tactics for 6 months. While the Keth continued their campaign of conquest, human scientists and engineers had worked in secret. They had analyzed every Keth weapon, studied every battle recording, and discovered something crucial. The Keth had never faced an enemy that could match their firepower. Their shields were designed to stop small human energy weapons, not the massive kinetic projectiles that the Defiance could fire, Dr. Patel, the lead weapons designer, joined them at the observation window. The magnetic railguns can fire a tungsten rod at 12% the speed of light, she explained. At that velocity, each projectile carries the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, and we can fire 6 of them every second. But the Defiance was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol. Every human colony that had fallen, every family that had been scattered, every world that had burned, they were all represented in the construction of this single ship. Volunteers had come from across human space to help build it, many of them refugees from Keth attacks. Duck and John Hayes, chosen to command the Defiance, reviewed the tactical reports one final time. The Keth were currently attacking the Vega system, following their usual pattern. They would position their fleet in high orbit, bombard the planet until resistance collapsed, then land their troops to establish control. They've never had to adapt their tactics, Captain Hayes noted. 3,000 years of the same strategy because it's always worked. That's going to be their weakness. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Defiance would jump directly into the Vega system and challenge an entire Keth fleet to single combat. It would be one human ship against dozens of Keth warships, but that was exactly what the humans wanted. They needed to prove that humanity could fight back, that the Keth were not invincible. News of the mission had spread through human space. Despite efforts to keep it secret, on every human world, families gathered around communication screens, waiting for word. The Keth had taken so much from them: homes, loved ones, hope itself. But now, finally, humanity was ready to strike back. On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew made final preparations. Each member had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. They came from different worlds, different backgrounds, but they shared the same determination. The galaxy would learn that humans did not break easily. Jump drive charge and ready, reported Lieutenant Park from the navigation station. All weapons systems armed and locked, confirmed Weapons Officer Collins. Shield generators at maximum power. Added Chief Engineer Ramos Hayes took his position in the command chair. Through the viewports, he could see the stars. Human space, the worlds they were fighting to protect. Soon, those same stars would witness humanity's first real battle against the Keth Empire. Helm, set course for the Vega system. Maximum jump. Hayes paused, knowing that his next words would echo through history. It's time to show the galaxy that humans don't surrender. The Defiance disappeared in a flash of blue light, carrying with it the hopes and fury of an entire species. Behind them, hidden shipyards continued their work, building more ships, preparing for the war that would determine humanity's fate. In the Vega system, Captain Vex was preparing for another routine conquest, unaware that his 3,000-year reign of terror was about to face its first real challenge. The Keth had ruled the stars through war, but they had never fought an enemy that learned from defeat, that grew stronger through adversity, that refused to accept the idea that some battles could not be won. The age of Keth dominance was about to end, and it would end with the thunder of human guns. Asterisk first contact. The Vega system's primary star cast its golden light across the Keth fleet as they maintained their standard bombardment formation. Captain Vex stood on the bridge of the Dark Fang, watching his gunners systematically destroy the human orbital defense platforms. It was routine work. The human weapons were too weak to penetrate Keth shields, and their tactics were predictable. Contact, shouted Sensor Officer Nex, his 4 eyes wide with surprise. Unknown vessel jumping in system. Massive energy signature. The Defiance materialized directly between the Keth fleet and the planet, its angular hull gleaming in the starlight. For a moment, both fleets simply stared at each other across the void. The human ship was smaller than the massive Keth battleships, but something about its design made it look deadly. "What is this?" Vex growled. "Another human ship? They send one vessel against our entire fleet." On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Hayes surveyed the enemy formation. 12 Keth battleships, 36 cruisers, and countless smaller vessels. The largest space fleet in the galaxy, assembled for what should have been another easy conquest. "Communications, open a channel to the Keth fleet," Hayes ordered. "Sir, they're not responding to our hails," reported Communications Officer Lewis. "Then, we'll speak in a language they understand. Weapons. Target the nearest battleship. Fire when ready." The Defiance spoke with the voice of thunder. 6 tungsten rods launched from its magnetic railguns, crossing the space between ships in milliseconds. The Keth had designed their shields to deflect energy weapons, but these were solid projectiles moving at nearly the speed of light. The first rod punched through the Keth battleship shields like they weren't there. The second and third tore massive holes in the hull. The fourth and fifth shattered the ship's reactor core. The sixth was unnecessary. The battleship was already breaking apart, its wreckage spreading across space like a metal flower blooming. In the dark, silence fell across both fleets. In 3,000 years of conquest, no one had ever destroyed a Keth battleship in a single attack. "Impossible," whispered Commander Tor, staring at the debris field where the Iron Claw had been moments before. "Their weapons cannot penetrate our armor." Captain Vix's shock lasted only seconds before being replaced by rage. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel. Destroy it immediately." The Keth fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy, beams that could melt mountains, plasma torpedoes that could crack continents, particle cannons that had shattered a dozen worlds. The space around the Defiance filled with deadly light as the combined firepower of the galaxy's greatest war fleet focused on a single target. But the human ship didn't die. Its revolutionary hull absorbed much of the energy, while its shields deflected the rest. Damage reports flooded in: hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, shield generators overloading, minor fires in engineering. But the Defiance held together. "Return fire," Hayes commanded. "Show them what happens when you corner humanity." The human battleship's weapons fired again and again. Each salvo sent tungsten rods screaming across space at incredible speed. Keth ships that had seemed invincible began to crack and burn. Their ancient armor, designed to stop energy weapons, was useless against kinetic projectiles that hit like the fist of an angry god. The battle became a dance of death among the stars. The Defiance used its superior speed to avoid the worst of the Keth firepower, while its railguns systematically dismantled the enemy fleet. But the humans were taking damage too. Systems failed, crew members fell, and the ship's hull began to show the strain of fighting impossible odds. Hull breach. On deck 4, reported damage control officer Martinez. We're losing atmosphere. Seal it off, Hayes ordered, never taking his eyes off the tactical display. 3 Keth battleships destroyed, 7 cruisers dead, but more were closing in. The Defiance was powerful, but it was still just one ship against a fleet on the planet. Below, the human colonists watched in amazement as their single battleship held its own against the mighty Keth armada. Word spread through the refugee camps and underground shelters. Humanity was fighting back at last. But, Captain, Vex was not finished. He had lost ships, yes, but he still had the advantage of numbers. The human vessel was brave but doomed. He would crush it, capture its crew, and learn its secrets. Then he would use those secrets to build an even more powerful Keth fleet. All remaining ships, form attack formation 7, Vex commanded. We end this now. The surviving Keth vessels moved to surround the Defiance, cutting off its escape routes. The human ship was trapped, surrounded, and running out of ammunition. But Captain Hayes smiled as he watched the enemy formation close around them. Now they'll learn, he said quietly, that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is a human with nothing left to lose. The tide turns, the Defiance hung in space like a wounded predator, surrounded by the remaining Keth fleet. Smoke drifted from hull breaches and sparks flew from damaged control panels. The human battleship had fought magnificently, but mathematics was against it. One ship could not defeat an entire armada. Captain, Vex allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as his vessels closed the trap. The human ship had surprised them. Yes, but the Keth had adapted. They had learned to coordinate their fire, to predict the enemy's movements, to exploit the weaknesses in its armor. Now it was time to finish what should have been a simple conquest. Human vessel, you have fought well. Vex broadcast on all frequencies. Surrender now, and your crew will be granted the honor of slavery. Continue to resist, and you will all die. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Hayes checked the tactical display one final time. The Keth had them surrounded, just as the humans had hoped. Enemy ships filled the space around them, packed together in a tight formation, all focused on a single target. Sir, we're receiving multiple jump signatures, reported sensor operator Kim, her voice filled with excitement. Massive contacts incoming? The space around Vega's system suddenly filled with the blue-white flash of hyperspace jumps. Not one ship, not 2, but dozens of human vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and carriers. The entire human fleet, arriving exactly on schedule. Admiral Morgan's voice crackled over the communications system from her flagship. The Liberation? Sorry we're late, John. Traffic was terrible. The Keth fleet found itself caught between 2 forces. The Defiance might have been surrounded, but now the entire human armada had arrived to even the odds. And unlike the Keth, who had grown comfortable. With easy victories, the humans had spent months preparing for this exact moment. Impossible, roared Captain Vex. Our sensors detected no human fleet movements. But the humans had learned from their defeats. They had developed new stealth technology, new jump calculations, new tactics specifically designed to counter Keth. Advantages. While the Keth had remained unchanged for millennia, humanity had evolved in the span of months. All ships, execute Battle Plan Alpha, Admiral Morgan commanded. Let's show them what happens when you threaten human families. The human fleet attacked with coordinated precision. While the Keth had always relied on individual ship prowess, the humans fought as a unified force. Their railguns fired in carefully timed salvos, overwhelming enemy shields through sheer volume of fire. Their missiles used new guidance systems that could penetrate Keth point defense. But most importantly, the humans fought with something the Keth had never encountered: absolute determination. Every human ship carried crew members who had lost homes to Keth attacks. Every captain commanded vessels named after fallen colonies. Every gunner fired with the memory of burned worlds in their hearts. The battle raged across the Vega system. as two different philosophies of war clashed among the stars. The Keth fought as they always had, with individual bravery and personal honor. But the humans fought as a species united by shared loss and common purpose. Captain Vex watched in growing horror as his fleet began to crumble. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds were burning wrecks drifting in space. His own Dark Fang shuddered under the impact of human weapons, its ancient armor finally meeting its match. Commander Tor, signal the fleet to retreat, Vex ordered, his pride warring with military necessity. Sir, retreat is not the Keth way, Tor protested. We have never fled from battle. Then perhaps it's time we learned? Vex replied grimly. Signal all ships. Emergency jump to hyperspace. We must warn the Empire of what we face. But the humans had anticipated this too. Their ships had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes, and their new hyperspace interdiction technology prevented enemy vessels from jumping to safety. The Keth fleet was trapped in normal space, forced to fight a battle they were no longer certain they could win. The Defiance, no longer alone, pushed forward to join its sister ships. Its crew cheered as human reinforcements poured fire into the surrounded Keth formation. The ship that had started the battle as a lone defender was now part of humanity's first real victory against their oppressors. Sir, the enemy formation is collapsing, reported Tactical Officer Stone from the bridge of the Liberation. Keth vessels are surrendering or attempting to flee. Admiral Morgan nodded grimly. This was just the beginning. The Keth Empire controlled thousands of worlds, commanded millions of ships, ruled over countless species. But today, in the Vega system, humanity had proven that the galaxy's greatest military power could be defeated. Signal the fleet, Morgan ordered. Prepare for hyperspace jump to the next system. We have a war to win. The age of Keth supremacy was ending, and it was ending with the thunder of human guns. Empire's End, the throne room of the Keth homeworld, had stood unchanged for 3,000 years. Massive stone pillars supported a ceiling that disappeared into shadow, while the walls displayed the battle banners of 1,000 conquered worlds. At the center of it all sat High Commander Kex, supreme ruler of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. But today, the ancient chamber echoed with sounds that had never been heard before. The footsteps of retreat, the voices of defeat, the whispers of fear. Captain Vex knelt before the throne, his once proud bearing broken by the shame of failure. You tell me that a single human ship destroyed the Iron Claw, High Commander Kex rumbled, his 4 eyes burning with disbelief. You tell me that their fleet appeared from nowhere and scattered our forces like leaves in a storm. You tell me that the humans refused to surrender. It is true, High Commander, Vex replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Their weapons are unlike anything we have faced. Their tactics are ... unpredictable. They do not fight for conquest or honor. They fight for survival. Reports had been flooding in from across the Empire. Human fleets were striking at Keth positions throughout the galaxy, using hit-and-run tactics that the rigid Keth command structure couldn't counter. Worlds that had been under Keth control for centuries were declaring independence. Other alien races, seeing that the Empire could be defeated, were rising in rebellion. 3,000 years, Kex growled, rising from his throne. 3,000 years of unbroken victory. And now you tell me we are losing to a species that has existed in space for barely 50 years. But even as he spoke, alarms began blaring throughout the fortress. The massive blast doors that had never been breached began to buckle under the impact of human weapons. The planetary shields that had protected the homeworld since the Empire's founding flickered and failed high above the planet's atmosphere. Admiral Morgan stood on the bridge of the Defiance, now flagship of the combined human fleet. Around her, 100 human warships prepared for the final assault. They had fought their way across the galaxy, liberating world after world, building their strength with each victory. Signal from the surface, Admiral, reported Communications Officer Davis. The Keth High Command is requesting terms for surrender. Morgan considered this for a moment. The humans could demand anything. the complete dissolution of the empire, the freeing of all enslaved worlds, reparations for the colonies that had been destroyed. They had earned the right through blood and fire, but she remembered the burning cities, the scattered families, the children who had lost everything too. Keth aggression. Justice demanded more than simple surrender. Tell them we'll discuss terms after they've experienced what it feels like to be helpless, Morgan replied. Begin orbital bombardment of military targets only, no civilian casualties. The human fleet opened fire with surgical precision. Instead of the Keth's brutal planetary bombardment that destroyed everything in sight, the humans targeted only military installations, communication centers, and weapons factories. It was a demonstration of both power and restraint. The humans could destroy the homeworld if they chose, but they were better than that dot in his throne room. High Commander Kex felt the building shake as human weapons found their targets. For the first time in his long life, he understood what the Empire's victims had experienced. The terror of being helpless, the despair of facing overwhelming force, the rage of seeing everything you had built turn to ash. "Aye, Commander," urged General Mech. "We must evacuate. The humans will breach the fortress within the hour." But Kex remained seated on his throne, staring at the battle banners of his ancestors. "No," he said quietly. "For 3,000 years, we have ruled through fear. We have conquered the weak and enslaved the defeated. We have taken what we wanted and destroyed what we could not use." The blast doors finally gave way, and human soldiers poured into the throne room. They moved with disciplined precision, their weapons ready, but not firing. At their head walked Admiral Morgan herself, her expression grim but not cruel. "I, Commander Kex," she said formally, "by the authority of the United Human Federation and the Free Worlds Alliance, you are under arrest for crimes against sapient species." Kex looked at this small human female who had brought down his empire. She stood barely 5 feet tall, her skin pale and soft, her limbs thin and fragile. By Keth's standards, she was pathetically weak. But she had done what no one in 3,000 years had managed. She had defeated the unconquerable. "Tell me, human," Keck said, as the soldiers placed restraints on his forearms. "What will you do with our empire?" Morgan smiled, and for the first time, it was not the smile of a warrior, but of a teacher. "We're going to do something you never learned, High Commander. We're going to give it back to the people who really own it." The Keth Empire was dead. In its place, a galaxy of free worlds would rise, united not by conquest, but by choice. And at the center of it all, humanity would stand not as conquerors, but as guardians, protecting the peace they had fought so hard to win. The stars were free at last. Asterisk.